We have been friends since 1989, and for many of our folks, that's before they were born. So I'm so glad to get a chance to talk with you in this format, Greg.
Yeah, great to be here. I still remember the first time that I heard from you. We got paired by Duke for roommates. Back then, there wasn't the sort of heavy matching program that they have right now. I have no idea what their algorithm was. And then about 3 days later, I got a letter from you. Hey, I'm Rich Sanders. And you had all these questions and you wanted to know so much stuff. And yeah, we were a great pair, I think. What an amazing job that Duke did at that time.
And all without the internet. Can you believe it?
I can't, without AI. Who knew?
Right. Who knew? Well, so Greg, where are you coming from today? How are you joining us?
Yeah, I'm from the amazing area of the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina, home of the Final Four Blue Devils.
Exactly. And although you didn't wear Duke gear today, I see that you got a Durham shirt on. Tell everybody about this.
Yeah, Durham is home of Duke University. It's an incredible little town, part of the sort of triad, as they say, the triangle here in North Carolina, which is Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill. One of those we don't talk about, but Durham is the sort of more artsy, down to earth of the three, and it has incredible restaurants and old brick buildings and just great places to go. It's where the Durham Performing Arts Center is located, which is the big theater for our area.
Oh, that's cool.
And is an amazing place to just go and hang out. We almost take all of our visitors there because it is just such a beautiful city.
Isn't that something? And you're reminding me, one of the most recent times that I saw you, we were visiting. My wife Rebecca and I were coming to visit you and your wife Laura, and our son Will was there with Team USA. So I want to say that was the COVID year, and they were playing in the Durham Bowl Stadium, and we got to see those brick buildings in that beautiful stadium.
Yeah, what a great stadium that is! An exceptional AAA stadium.
Indeed. And your shirt, even though it doesn't have all of the letters, I take it stands for Durham and is associated with the bull, right?
Well, Durham has taken on the moniker of Bull City.
Oh,
So
okay.
I don't know if you watch a lot of football games or even some basketball games now, people will be doing this. You're like, what is that? That's not. Is that a devil? No, it's
Yeah.
Bull City.
Oh,
Uh,
that's cool. I didn't know that. All right.
yeah, that's sort of what we do to recognize the incredible city that we live in.
That's so cool. Well, and so tell us a little bit about what you do for a living and your family.
Yeah, so I work for a company called Seuss, and it's a startup. It's a small company. Our goal is to really change the world of the way that marketing occurs to provide better revenue for financial services companies and closer relationships to our clients, while at the same time providing lower debt servicing on consumers. So lowering their interest rates, figuring out ways where they can actually have a break in life with not having to pay so much on a monthly basis through financial instrumentation that financial services that we work for can provide. And everybody wins. So
Yeah.
that's
Sounds
our
so
goal.
I love that. How do you spell Seuss?
Suus.
Suus. All right,
Yeah,
cool. And
it's
is that
a Greek word.
and so is that in the Research Triangle Park area?
No, it's based in Columbus, Ohio.
Okay.
And there's only currently 4 of us full time. So 2 people are in Columbus and 2 people are in the Carolinas.
Gotcha. Nationwide reach, and with only 4 people, I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, we serve big national banks. Again, big goals to kind of change the world of financial services marketing. We have a founder who's done that at big banks and was a big part of the Chase resurgence, Chase Bank during the 2007 crisis.
Hmm. Greg, we didn't really talk about that in advance of the podcast today, but I would like to, if you're okay talking with that, I would like to talk with you a little bit about that second goal you mentioned, right? So you're improving financial services marketing, but then there's also the benefit that people are able to kind of endure the burden of debt and have a better financial footing as a result. Let's talk
Yeah,
about that a minute because there's some pretty strong biblical principles there.
absolutely. So that's one of the reasons that I really enjoy working for this company, is because even though the banks or financial services companies are the ones that hire us, there's just a huge impact to the consumers who take the deals that we're offering on behalf of the banks.
Interesting. Can you give us
So
an example of what that? Yeah, exactly.
yeah, yeah. So let's just say that somebody has a large personal loan or credit card debt, something along those lines, and they're paying a lot each month for servicing those things, interest rate and principal. And sometimes they can't even get to the principal because the interest rates are killing them.
Hmm.
Well, we generally can find products for them that are going to have lower interest rates. So, for example, if they own a home, we can potentially find them a home equity loan where they can consolidate some of those debts, lower their monthly payments, and give them a little bit more freedom.
Wow.
Now, of course, we encourage that they pay off those loans. So this is not a way to just run up more debt,
Right.
but it is it's a way to improve people's lives through something that's very simple in terms of just introducing them to products that they may not even know about.
Well, that's a great point. And so, this somebody asked me once a couple of years ago, what's the difference between a Christian capitalist and Dave Ramsey? And the answer is we don't do any kind of financial advice or guidance here, but we talk to folks about what to do with the wealth that they've accumulated, regardless of how many zeros, if any, are in their bank account. As opposed to Ramsey, who has very specific guidance on how people should spend their money, and in particular, spends a lot of time talking about the negative aspects of debt.
Yep.
From your perspective, how have you seen debt affect people? Because I can tell you've got a heart for the consumer here, and I have a feeling that the experience that you have witnessed is not positive.
Yeah, thankfully, it's never been a situation that I've been in, because I've worked really hard to not be in that situation
Yeah.
where we have a heavy debt burden. But when we have seen people that have large debt burdens, it's money is a very difficult topic for all of us. And so you saw the cat
Even
there,
the
huh?
cat, even the cat actually ran away from the topic of money.
Exactly. So they feel overwhelmed. They feel like they're not worthy. They feel like they're sort of a lower part of society, and that their personal value is somehow tied to the amount of debt that they own, and it restricts them from really blossoming into the humans that they can be, and is very difficult for them. So they don't know how to get out of it. Oftentimes, they just keep running things up because it's part of like a depression syndrome, instead of figuring out a way out through maybe contacting a Dave Ramsey or some other organization that can help them. They actually will just continue the cycle, and it becomes, endemically bad.
That's a beautiful way to put it, and really does squash not only creativity, but in many cases the freedom of life itself. Right? You feel trapped in debt. That's the reason
Yeah,
it's a cliche. Well, I'm so
that's right.
delighted to hear that that's part of the work that you're doing. How did you come to take on this new job with this startup?
Well, everything builds on itself, right? God's
Right.
plan is amazing. So I'm going to go back a couple of jobs. So there was time that I took a job at another startup, a financial technology firm, and after 9 months, I was laid off along with the whole architecture team.
Oh wow.
And that was devastating because 2 months beforehand, I had bought a home, right?
Right.
So that was a rough situation. But I have a lot of friends, and through networking, reached out and was offered a job at a consulting company, doing data and it was called analytics back then. Now it's evolved into AI consulting.
Okay. Okay.
And one of the clients that we had during the 7 years that I was there was the founder of this company who was doing exactly what we're doing now at another bank.
I see.
And about a year ago, we started talking, and really as a referral from somebody else who said, "Hey, Greg, you should be talking with Panikos," who's the name of the founder. to see if there's a good match because he's looking for a head of technology. And he liked the work that I did for him. We have a good personality match. We're very different, but as complementary skill sets and approaches, it works really well. And so after several months of talking, he got to the point where he was ready to pull the trigger, and I was ready to accept the trigger.
And here, exactly, and here you are, Greg.
Yeah.
You and I, as we told the audience at the outset, you and I have been friends for a long time, and we were roommates together at Duke. And so we've been through a lot of the opportunities and the challenges, the fun times and some of the not so fun times in life together. When you're going through this period of time where you are in this rough situation and then looking for a next step, the next door to be opened, how did prayer fit into your life at that time? We interviewed somebody on last week's episode who talked about she was in a very dark place and just clung on to the word as tightly as she could until the light was open and she pursued it. And as a result, talk about moves, went from Togo to the United States. So that's a pretty big
Wow.
move, right?
That's a huge move.
So how did that work for you though?
Yeah. So I have to say, it was a very dark place, and I let myself go there. It was only about 2 months where I was out of work, but it was very difficult. It's actually less than 2 months now that I think about it. But it was so difficult for me that whole period of time is sort of like a black spot in my life where I can't even remember a whole lot of the things that were going on. I remember doing a lot of crying, walking around the house, wondering how I was going to take care of my family. I did praying. I reached out to a lot of people that's when you learn who your friends are, because even if they can't serve you by helping you with a job, they'll just call you and find out how you're doing and talk to you. What I learned, not surprisingly, was that I put a lot of value on who I am based on what I do for a living.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not really the way God wants us to feel. He wants us to put all of our value into what he's done for us.
Exactly. Into him.
So that was a learning for me. And I think that's helped me a lot over time to have gone through that, even though it was a brief period of time. I know people have gone through a lot worse situations than I did. But it helped me recognize that there's this sort of, I'll call it lack of faith or not deep enough faith, that I placed it in my own value of employment rather than sort of just believing in God and trusting that he's going to take me where he wants me to be.
It's so funny, Greg, because we talked about this a little bit earlier in the week. It's so difficult to maintain that faith when you're in these rough situations, these dark times. Even though Jesus spent so much time talking to us all, don't worry, let not your heart be troubled. God's
Yeah.
got you. But it's so difficult to do that, right? And I'm thinking of Peter walking out on the water until he realized, hey, I'm on the water, and then bloop, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard to do that when push comes to shove.
It's hard. It really tests you. And I can't say that I came away with an A+ during that period of time. I feel like I'm better off because of it, and certainly have figured out that next time, if that ever happens, I'll respond differently. But yeah, I mean, God said he will take care of us. He talked about, in various ways, look at nature, right?
That's right. Look at the sparrows. Look at the
Look at
lilies of the field. Right.
we're going to handle it. I'll handle it for you. That's not your job.
Exactly. And so even though you were just saying in a self-derogatory way, I didn't get an A+, just the fact that you're here today in a great spot with the Lord and a great spot with your business is encouraging to those that are hearing your voice. I think that's just terrific. But the business is full of challenges, right? Things come and go. We're sitting here on April 2nd. The economy is in twists and turns that nobody can really understand, kind of where they're going to end up. But I think it's a good time in our country, globally as well, for people to just remember, hey, God's got this. Don't fret. Just easier
Yes.
said than done, I guess.
Yeah. Certainly, if you do that, you'll find yourself in a much better state, right?
Yes.
Emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually. It all comes down to having that faith in God that He's going to take care of you. And every day, you know, you don't know what's going to come your way, but we're told not to worry.
That's
Don't
exactly
worry
right.
about tomorrow. Tomorrow has its own worries.
I read that somewhere. I love that. And furthermore, when you are walking, with God, and you have that peace, physically and mentally and spiritually, I describe that as the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding. Right? It's not up for us to understand how it works; it just works.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to brag on one of my daughters real quick.
That's good. I was going to ask you about your family next.
Everybody's doing really well, but
Good.
there's one that I want to talk about specifically. Cameron just graduated from NC State in December,
Awesome.
and uh,
Congratulations to her and to you all.
she graduated not having a job due to various reasons, where it really it wasn't possible for her to spend a lot of time looking for a job while she was in school. So then she graduated. She didn't have a job. And what did she do? Well, she actually dedicated herself to going to the gym every day, right? Taking care of herself physically. She did Bible study and prayer. And then she put her church first. She started volunteering at two different kids events, one during service, take care of kids, and then one watching and serving the junior high ministry.
Mm.
And 2 months later, she found a job. I personally attribute that to the faith that she has, and living a healthy lifestyle, putting God first, and He took care of things.
Exactly. He took care of things. And furthermore, that last part I want to kind of loop back to that last part where she's volunteering at church and helping others, right? That's one of the core concepts of the Christian capitalist is servant leadership, and that when we are a blessing to others, we are likewise blessed. What do you think about
Yes.
that?
Yeah, that's 100% true. No question about it. And you know that when you do service because you walk away with a feeling of gratification, right?
Right.
And it's not, I'm going to say that gratification feeling doesn't come from us, it comes from above.
Mm.
It's how we were built
Mm.
to receive the feeling of gratification or blessing when we help others.
Greg, I,
So,
I agree with you completely. God made us to work and God made us to give, right? And we're made in his image because we know he works and gives. Hey, I want to ask you about that because we haven't had a chance to speak about that. But in the book, we mentioned in kind of the latter half that a social scientist a couple years ago on her podcast it's called the Happiness Podcast, that she did this experiment where people were given a certain amount and then were either going shopping and getting stuff for themselves or giving it to others. And across the board, the folks who were giving it to others were more satisfied and more pleased. And kind of they felt more fulfilled. That's where the experiment stopped. But I take it as, and I'd love your thoughts on this, that the reason that's the case is that's the way God made us, right? That
yeah,
we're built to enjoy giving. What do you think of
yes,
that?
absolutely. That is. And I can tell you, um, there's an organization that I love to give to. You'd like this organization. I don't know if you've heard of them, the International Justice Mission.
No, what's that?
Okay. So this is a superstar team of lawyers.
Okay.
What? Lawyers? Yeah, I said it.
Superstars?
They're like the superheroes of, I don't know, the world. Their focus is on rescuing people from slavery and injustice.
Wow.
They will actually swoop in third world countries with the local police and literally pull people out of slavery from, if there are women who are enslaved, like in sex slavery, or if there are, boys like Malta in Ghana is a very famous place where young boys are enslaved. Um, they'll swoop in and rescue those kids. And that's their side of the rescue. And then there are other charities who are standing by to take them and encourage them and nurture them and teach them how to move back into society. But this is so when I give to IJM, I just feel thrilled. Like, it's a huge blessing to me to be able to be a part of this. You know, the only thing I do is give money, but these guys are like amazing superstars, and I feel a part of the I guess salvation of
Right.
men and women and children because of that little small part that I play.
Isn't that something? And Greg, I got to tell you, I can just see it on your face that when you give to the IJM, you're thrilled because they couldn't do that work. They couldn't swoop in and save the people who are enslaved without the funding to do so. Right. So everybody's got a role to play.
That's right.
That's fantastic. So you got Cameron volunteering at church. You got giving you and Laura giving to IJM. Let's talk a little bit about your family, and feel free to brag on your daughters. I know them; they're awesome. And what kind of conversations y'all have had as parents and a family about giving? Because you've already listed treasure. You've already listed time and talents. I mean, that covers the waterfront, right? From your typical stewardship sermon. So, how did those conversations go when the girls were at home?
So from the time that, I don't know, they were born, I'm going to say, but it was probably not exactly when they were born. Um, we bought each of the kids these little plastic banks that had three sides: church, bank, store.
Wow. Okay.
And every month, I think it was, I would give them their allowance, and they would put 10% into church, 20% into bank, and then 70% into store. And so that was just something that from day one we embedded into their psyche of, this is how you go about life. You always give, save, and then the rest is for you. And we never criticized how they used the store, because we didn't really want that to be a part of, you know, I didn't want them to feel like somehow we were judging them for using the money in the way they wanted. Sometimes they would give out of the store, right?
Oh, okay.
One of my daughters loved buying candy, so almost all of her store money went to candy for many years.
The girl after my own heart. I love it.
But that's the model. And you know, I haven't actually wanted to step into their finances right now unless asked, but I hope that they have taken that model and just used it for an ongoing basis.
Well, I can assure you that even if they're not doing it right now, that it's because you started it so early, that financial discipline, that it's for sure there. We've had guests on the podcast. You and I were talking about this a little bit. We've had guests on the podcast who talk about the financial discipline and the giving discipline as kind of muscle memory, right? It's a skill that you develop over time. And so I'm just thrilled to hear that you and Laura, your wife Laura, did that with the girls from a very young age. What were the girls' responses to that? Because Rebecca, my wife, and I have always talked to our kids about giving, but in many cases, the kids would come back and say, "Well, where do we give and how do we give?" Did y'all ever talk about that?
Not necessarily. We believe that the 10% goes to church, right? And then on top of that, it can go elsewhere, like to IJM or wherever.
Mm-hmm.
But they never questioned it, and we were in church almost every week, so they loved bringing their little bags of money and donating them when they went to church. It was sort of something I guess they could be proud of, like, hey, look, we get to contribute to this as well. It's really funny because some of their classrooms didn't have like giving plates or anything, because why would a 6-year-old room have a place
Have an auditorium, Right. That's awesome.
But
Well, Greg,
nevertheless, they
yeah,
did.
they did. I can't help but think as you have divided up the three categories of spending, I can't help but think of John Wesley's sermon from the 1750s, where he tells the members of his congregation that the best way to handle your money in accordance with Scripture and to help you love your neighbor is to earn all you can, save all you can, and give all you can. And so I wonder, as I kind of repeat Wesley's sermon, kind of the message to you, what your thoughts are about that, because it seems like the way that you taught the girls to do that is very much consistent with that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It also makes you feel like you have a sense of freedom, right? So you have the freedom to give. That's really important for the reasons that we talked about. It's how we were built, and it gives us a sense of gratification. The saving is really important because particularly early in life, when it's the hardest to save, that's when your savings matter the most, and it gives you the ability to do things later in life that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do if you had no savings. Taking a chance on a business, or being able to pay for your kids' college, or whatever that is, that's all about saving. And
And it
then
happens way in the future or way in the past, right?
yeah, yeah. So my oldest brother Randy is an economist
Mm.
at Florida State University, and he has this really fun sort of fact that he likes to say, which is, or I guess, story. And he says, "Okay, who in the long run is going to be better off? The guy. So assuming a 10%, I think it's a 10%. I think it's a 7%." 7% interest rate. I could be completely whacking the story, but don't worry about that.
An
So,
interest rate that's not super high and not super
right,
low. How about that?
right. It's a realistic interest rate.
Yeah.
Who's going to be better off in the long run? The guy who puts away $1 a year for the first 10 years of his uh, of his life, and then never gives again,
Mhm.
or the guy who gives nothing for the first 10 years and then starts giving $1 a year into savings.
Mm.
The answer is it's the guy who's putting in the dollar for the first 10 years. Those early savings are the things that really matter. So I've been encouraging, as my kids move into the working world, for them to understand that. Of course, I tell them that story, but also it's just the foundation for setting themselves up for a later life. Is you got to have money. They want to buy homes. They want to buy cars. My dad taught me, don't ever use debt for anything other than a home. What does that mean? It means you got to save money to buy a car, right?
Right.
Cars are expensive.
Yeah.
So so yeah,
Yeah,
there's
they
a
are.
lot of saving that needs to be done in order to be able to achieve the things that each individual has in mind.
I just love that, and again, that's very consistent with Dave Ramsey and the other kind of financial counselors who say avoid debt if you can, with of course the exception of the house. Hey, but you raise a great point. I want to loop back to when it comes to savings, and in particular for young people, because we do have so many college students and folks who are newly graduated. When an employer says, "Hey, we have a 401k plan and a 3% match," would you mind explaining briefly what that means and whether you would encourage a new member of the workforce to take advantage of that?
Well, I certainly encourage anyone to take advantage of free money that's given to them. So
Amen.
and the employers want to do it. There are actually government rules in place that they need a certain level of, I'll call it the lower income employees, participating in one of those plans in order for it to be considered government acceptable.
Mm.
So yeah, so if there's a 3% match, let's just pretend it's, for the first 3% you give, they'll match 100% of that 3%. Then yeah, absolutely, you should be giving all 3%. Now, you heard my numbers. That's not enough. 3% savings, even when it turns out to be 6%, I don't think is going to get you where you want to be. So I would say max out to the degree possible the amount you can save into something like a tax-free fund, but recognize that a 401k is a plan that you can't actually tap until you're 67 or whatever the rule will be at the time you retire. So that can't be your only plan. You have to have taxable savings as well that you can use for things like cars and homes and whatever else, funding a business that you want to do.
Right. That's a great point. And I think while we're kind of rounding out the savings plan, there's the very long term savings for retirement, like the 401k or the IRA. Then the mid to long term savings, like you just mentioned, for houses, cars, and big life events like starting a business. And then there's the shorter term savings, what many folks call to as emergency savings. While we're kind
Yeah.
of rounding out Greg's financial tips, let's talk about that a minute, because I know that's part of what you have encouraged your daughters to do and what you do as well.
Yeah. What else do you want to know?
Well, what's an example of emergency? Would you have an emergency need to go buy a house? Probably not.
No. I think there's emergency money, which you generally try to keep us a little bit more conservative in terms of the investments, right? So some people say it's 6 months, some people say it's 12 months. That's 12 months of your income, right? Or 6 months of your income. And you can stare at that and say, that is incredibly daunting. But it is, I think, safe for when you get into situations where you do end up in unemployment. And all of us do. I've been unemployed twice, once by choice and once not. So you need to have some emergency savings so that you can cover those periods of time, and hopefully you've saved enough. And then you've got those. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You finish your thought. Sorry.
To say, then you've got the sort of midterm savings for big purchases that you know you're going to have to have. You're going to have a car, and then maybe 10 years later, you're going to probably have to have another car because that one's worn out. Right. So you got to keep planning for those things. And then I'll call them slightly longer term savings, which is college savings for your kids. We chose to do that. We wanted to put our kids in the world debt free after college, so that was an important thing that we decided to do. That was a 20-year, savings plan, which then depletes to nothing.
Exactly.
College.
That's right. It's one of the few savings plans that you want to build up and then you want to spend, right?
Yeah.
That's funny. Well, and yeah, I mean, listen, even if you have a job, an emergency savings account can be great for things like when the car breaks down or the air conditioner runs out or the hot water heater breaks and you've got to replace it on an urgent basis.
Yeah, absolutely.
So speaking of starting businesses, you and I were just talking that you now have a home in Wilmington, North Carolina that you're putting on Airbnb, VRBO, both, right? That you're renting out. What made you want to get into that business?
Well, I think I have a real interest in real estate for as an investment. Mm-hmm. And we also wanted to selfishly have a place where we could go that would be income producing as well.
Sure.
So we decided that we would give this a try as a business. It's brand new. We've just had it for a month. There's not a single.
Congratulations.
Yeah, we haven't gotten a single booking yet, so this whole thing could be disastrously wrong.
That's awesome. Hey, listen, we're going to put links in the show notes for folks who want to go to North Carolina to Wilmington. That they can get a beautiful home courtesy of you and Laura. I think that's.
I would appreciate that. Yes. Yeah. So Laura is the manager of that, and we're just figuring out our way how to actually run a successful short-term rental. But I think that was the other thing that's important to me is diversification, right? So in case that something happens, again in my current job, we'd like to have another income stream, even if it's a small one, to keep us rolling. So that's a part of the hope and plan here.
Sure, it makes sense to be diversified. And this is not your first foray into small business, kind of as a side venture. What about the yogurt business from a few years back?
Yes, we were owners in a Menchie's franchise down in Palm Harbor, Florida. Right. That was hard. We knew it would be hard going into it, because it's a lot of labor management. And in order to, come close to making a profit, it's a lot of low cost labor that you're employing, high school kids and, maybe kids who are just out of high school. And they're not always as dependable as you would want. We had great kids, to be fair, but, the standards with which they would take care of the business were not up to our standards, right? If Laura had been in there every day, the place would have been spotless. Every guest would have been greeted in a certain way, and so on and so forth. And the kids, they have no vested interest in that. They're just being paid whatever it was per hour to take cash and clean up a little bit. So that little, we have high standards, and so that made it hard for us. And then it ended up being not a money winner. We took a huge loss on Menchie's. But thankfully, through our long-term savings, we were able to stomach that loss, which is why I think it is important for people to save and then take risk.
Right.
Sometimes it will pay, sometimes it won't.
Exactly. And so there are a whole bunch of Christians out there, Greg, who will say, God wants me to be successful. God wants me to make a lot of money. God wants me to have a terrific, successful business. You're a man of devout faith. What did it feel like when your business wasn't doing so well? How did that challenge your faith, if at all, and make you think about those kind of general concepts?
Didn't touch my faith at all. But I don't necessarily believe that God wants any of us to be successful or wealthy or anything like that. That's not what he promised.
I didn't mean for that to be a trick question, but you went right where I was hoping you would go. Yeah. What do you think of that general notion? God wants me to be a millionaire.
He never says that.
No.
He says that we're going to have a lot of trials, and the only thing he promises is that he'll be there for us. So some of us will be successful. Some of us will not be successful. Some of us will be very healthy. Some of us will have terrible health conditions that are debilitating and painful our whole lives. None of that has anything to do with God's love for us. I don't know why he picks certain people for certain things, but I do know that the only promise, again, he's made is that he'll be there. So as the business failed, that was not fun to go through, but it was nothing to do with God.
I love that. Just keeping them separate. Now, having said that, there are many Christians, and I refer them as Christian capitalists, who, when they do have a successful business, whether it's an account with 1 zero or account with many zeros, that as a result, they take the success that they've experienced and share the benefits of that with others, which is one of the core messages of the Christian capitalist. So in both your ventures into small business and your work with financial institutions, how have you seen that concept played out by different business owners or business executives?
I don't usually talk a lot with people that I work with about their giving lives. Maybe I should. I don't know, but
no,
I know
that
I'll say I can tell you that tithing is valuable. It's critical, really. And there have been times in my life when I felt it was not possible for me to tithe, and I stopped, and that impacted my relationship with God. Not because he needs the money, but because he's looking for us to trust in him. And interestingly, when we started giving again, really just because I felt like I needed to, it was a total lack of faith for me to stop tithing. And then we would start tithing. And those 2 times when that occurred, within 6 months, the money was more than made up.
Bunny turned right around.
I was floored in both situations. And you know what's so funny? In one of those times, I was at a church, Grace Church, in near Tampa, Florida.
Mhm.
And the pastor had, and I'm not saying that anybody should do this, but the pastor had a
We'll try
tithing
to
challenge.
at home.
Yeah, he had a tithing challenge, and he was like, I want you to tithe. If you don't get more than that money back within the next 6 months, we'll give you all your money back. Now,
Whoa.
that is a very interesting challenge. I don't know how biblical that particular challenge would be, but I know that in my situation, it was absolutely accurate. And that church had a lot of money and a lot of followers, a lot of people going every week because it just kept growing and growing. The kids ministry was huge. NFL players and other major professional athletes would show up there. Tony Dungy would work the parking lot. I mean,
Wow.
it was Tony Dungy, right after
Yeah.
winning multiple Super Bowls as head coach, he felt led to serve in the parking lot of a church, guiding cars in. So
Isn't that funny?
if he can do it, we all can do
Exactly.
it.
Exactly. That's right. And what a great example of servant leadership, Tony Dungy in the parking lot. I love that. Yeah,
They had to stop him from doing that after a while because people would just basically get distracted looking at
right.
Tony, and the whole parking lot would get jammed up. So they pulled him back in after a period of time, and he just ended up teaching a Bible study, which was hugely
I
popular.
was just going to say, let me guess, it was the most popular Bible study. Isn't that wonderful? Well,
Yeah.
Greg, getting back to the tithing challenge, I agree with you. I need to think about that for a minute from a biblical perspective. But not knowing your pastor, I have a feeling that the sentiment behind it is sound, which is put your trust in God, which we see
Yeah.
all throughout the Psalms. We hear Jesus tell us time and time again, put your trust in God. And when you do, you will be repaid accordingly. From my perspective, it's not always within 6 months you're going to get more back than you put in, but building a foundation for treasure in heaven and getting a hold of the life that really is life, which of course is one of the themes of the book.
Yep.
What kind of as we talk about the notion of tithing, the motto of the Christian capitalist is the more we make, the more we give. How
Hmm.
because you've had a variety of different jobs in your career, how have you found that the nature of your giving has changed? Are you pretty consistent in saying, it's 10%? You mentioned time when you had stopped. Have you ever seen or had an example, whether it's y'all or others, where there's a big year and you give away even bigger?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. If we can, we will. We do, as a minimum, we do 10% to the church. And then we'll give on top of that to other organizations as well. Um, you know, I think there are some people that we have talked with that have like a goal every year of increasing their percentage. We haven't had, I guess, percentage wise, we probably could do that, but we haven't had as predictable an income just because of the various jobs that I have taken over the years, which income will go up or down. But yeah, we do, as I mentioned earlier, I love giving. And so if I can give to an organization that I believe in, that is Christian, on top of what we've already tithed, I'd love to do that.
Well, and fair enough. And it's interesting because you talk about that as a consultant and a financial services technology expert. There are a lot of folks who listen to this podcast who say, "Hey, this is the way it is every year in my career," namely real estate agents. Right? Unless you're out there listing, unless you're out there selling, and unless you're out there closing, there's nothing coming in the door. And so to have the commitment to give, regardless of whether it's a down month or a low month, is certainly understandable. But ultimately, whatever comes in the door, so many of the folks we've talked to on the podcast say, "Hey, 10% of every check comes in, whether it's a couple $100s or a couple thousand." you know.
Yeah, it's
What do you
true.
think of that?
We've had situations where um, we have decided as a family to take a lower income. Uh, Actually, I'll give an interesting example. So my same daughter, Cameron, uh, it was her, I don't know what it was, 11th birthday or something like that. We were I was working in Connecticut at a hedge fund, and her birthday was coming up the next month. And I said, Cameron, what are you going to do for a birthday party next month? You know, I was really excited because I love celebrating their birthdays.
Sure.
And she said, that we've been living there for 3 years at this point. She said, I'm not having one. And
Oh,
I said, why aren't you having one? And she said, I don't have any friends. And so, okay, Cameron is the sweetest, most loyal friend a person could have on this planet. If there's ever a need, Cameron will be the one who will be there to help that person through the situation. She was just there last night. Her boyfriend and his roommate are having some studying uh, constraints. They're
yeah.
still in school, and she was there last night cleaning their kitchen. Okay, like she is the person that I just can't imagine her. Like that blew me away, and that was a devastating statement for your daughter to
Especially
make.
your 11-year-old daughter. Goodness.
So then I knew right at that time that we had to make a change, and I was making a pretty good amount of money in Connecticut. Well, we turned that into a positive. Over the next few months, we sat down as a family and said, okay, let's decide what we want our lives to be like. And then we designed the ideal state for our lives that we wanted next. And we described the neighborhood in very sort of plain detail. Like we wanted it to be a place where there were sidewalks in front of the houses, and where the front porches were pushed right up against the sidewalk, and where we could see people walking around, and where there would be sort of a central place, like with stores for people to gather and have coffee and those sorts of things. And and together as a family, we then did a search where we would fly to various cities, including Atlanta, where you were,
Right, right.
and we looked to see, can we find this neighborhood? And we had other things in there as well around climate. You know, we wanted to be warm, and there were a whole bunch of things in this pie that we were trying to find. And then we did end up finding a neighborhood exactly that way in Florida, which is where my oldest daughter, Kelly, you know, after graduating from college, moved back to.
Wow, is that right? And was that Palm Harbor?
Yeah, it's Tampa, close
Tampa.
to Palm
Okay,
Harbor. Yeah.
gotcha. Isn't
So,
that something?
having said that, I'm going to go back to the money situation. I ended up getting paid a third of what I was making in Connecticut.
Whoa.
Yeah. So um, that is a big uh, financial difference. But I think it's important for people to recognize that when you need to make a change in life, it's not about money.
Yeah.
We were no less happy in Tampa than we were in Connecticut. We were actually more happy, and we're making a lot less money as a family. So it's prioritizing the things that are important, and um, and taking risks. Which what we spoke about the
Yeah.
other day. Like
Yeah.
taking those risks to do the things that are going to enrich your life and enrich your spiritual life. That's what it's really about.
Because what gives you the confidence to take that risk? We talked about it just 30 minutes
Yeah,
ago.
yeah, it's trust in the Lord.
Exactly. It gives you that firm foundation for building for the future. I just love the way that y'all handled this as a family.
Yeah,
And terrific example of that. All right. So you mentioned Kelly. I want to brag on her for a second because she's a hardworking young nurse in Tampa and really just an outstanding leader in her field. where, because in our project here, the Christian Capitalists, we talk about hard work and generous giving. Where did work come in to your conversations with the girls as you and Laura were raising them?
Yeah, hard work was one of the things that I impressed upon them the most. I don't know how many times I told them that when they were doing something, I didn't necessarily care what the outcome was, but they better put everything into it. If they didn't try their hardest, that's when I was going to get upset.
Wow.
So they learned, and I set an example. I'm one of the harder workers out there. And they learned that that was what was important, hard work. And of course, this is straight from a biblical principle, one that's actually sort of become one of my life verses. In everything you do your work heartily as for the Lord rather than for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance. It is the Lord Christ whom you serve.
Wow, that is a beautiful summary of what we've been talking about. Where is that from?
Man, why are you going to ask me that? I can cite verses, but not always tell you
I know, I'm tough on that
I'll
too.
figure it out though.
No, it's okay. We'll figure it out and put it in the show notes. Do your work heartily.
Yes.
Because you're
So
serving the
I
Lord.
take that, and that's in everything, literally in everything. So I know, for example, people can tend to get discouraged if they're like stay-at-home moms and there's like the house is a mess and the kitchen is dirty and stuff like that, because I hear that frequently. And to me, I think, what a blessing that the home is a mess and that there's dirty dishes and like the opportunity to clean up and serve in the capacity that I've been given is a huge blessing. And I think we should just do it as hard as we can, right?
Right on.
So yeah, I'm a hard worker, and I take that seriously in every role that I play. Go hard or go home.
That's fantastic. Well, Greg, as we round out our time together, I mean, this hour has flown by. As we round out our time together, I want to ask you about before we round out our time together, you and I have discussed a friend of yours, family member who has given generously, and we don't want to get into the details of him out of respect for him because he wanted to remain anonymous. But I also would like to tell you to tell folks about this. As I used to say when I was doing compliance training as a lawyer, don't tell me about your specific circumstances. Say, I have a friend who. So tell us a little bit about that and how people can get called into ways that they might otherwise not have any concept of to serve God until they're doing it. And then all of a sudden it becomes a habit that lasts a lifetime. Would you mind sharing that with us a little bit?
Yeah. So I have a friend who did really well in business and was able to retire, I believe, at the age of 49.
Wow.
And after that time, spent a number of years building churches in South America, Cuba, and places where he and his wife would not just fund the church, but actually go on the church planning mission, because he wanted to make sure that he was invested in it, right? That it was a good place. And most people don't. They'll either pay the money or they'll be the sort of church planning hunters. But he was wanting to be involved in both.
Exactly. Yeah.
So he would go down, he would scope it out, he'd get to know the people, and then he would invest in building the church. And I can't remember what the final count was. I think it was around 30.
Wow.
Yeah. And I don't think he does that anymore. Just because I think the trip's maybe physically too difficult at this point. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. But what an impact he has made at all of those churches in places where he had no connection, but he wanted to bless the community and did so in ways that were probably more than those people could even describe.
Absolutely. And shine the light of Christ all over the hemisphere. And I love that story because that's a component that I really hadn't understood before. It's not just the giving, but it's also the taking action. And it seems to me that whether any of our listeners have the capacity to do that, to go plant churches and fund them, or whether it's just taking one person aside and reading the gospel to them or explaining the way that God loved us so much, he gave us his only son, is enough to get that exponential effect, right? So you don't have to have a lot of money. You don't have to go to a foreign country to plant a church to spread the
Yeah.
gospel. But those that do that, I think, provide encouragement to all of us. To,
Yeah.
as Jesus told the parable of Good Samaritan, go and do likewise, whatever that
Yeah.
means for you.
Yeah. I mean, my current church, one of the phrases that gets tossed around is the best place to build disciples is your living room, right?
Ah,
Invite your neighbors in, teach them about the word, and see if the Spirit moves in them.
Greg, if I recall, back in when y'all lived in Connecticut, you had something like a church that met in your living room. Is that right?
Well, we've we felt like we've been blessed enough to have places where we could have small groups.
Hmm.
So when we've been at a church where small groups are supported, which is pretty much all of our churches, um, in some of the cases we've hosted the small groups at our house, and so that's one of the things that we have been able to provide. Interestingly, we didn't always lead the small groups, which I think is great in terms of it allows, like, as in the Bible, we're all different parts of the body, right?
Right.
So someone's a finger, someone's a toe, someone's a liver, right? So we were able to provide a facility, and we would provide snacks and stuff like that. And then another person who has the gift of teaching was able to come in and use his gift for our small groups. So that was very satisfying and rewarding to us.
That's so cool. So, Greg, now as we round out our time together, we really have fully gone an hour. As we round out our time together, I want to ask you kind of our signature question, and that is, what does it mean to you to be a Christian capitalist? You were one of the first people to text me and say, "I bought the book last summer and ordered enough copies for the girls." So, what does it
Yeah.
mean to you to be a Christian capitalist, and why is this call to you?
Yeah. So the only issue that I have with your book, which is beautiful and full of wisdom and scripture, is the name.
Fair
Because
enough.
Christian should not be the adjective.
Mm,
I feel like Christian should be the noun, and you put whatever adjective you want in front of it. Capitalist Christian, dad Christian, homeowner Christian, boss Christian, like that is the thing that is the binding agent of our lives. And so the noun is Christian. So I'm answering your question. To be a Christian capitalist, you have to be a Christian, and everything else falls around it. And then, if really you're wanting to serve the Lord the way that He's asked us to, um, is hard work. Hard work leads to good outcomes that we can use to bless others as a part of a virtuous cycle that He has created for us.
I love that. Greg, thank you so much. What a beautiful way to summarize, regardless of the grammar. What a beautiful way to summarize the message that we're trying to impart. Thank you again. God bless you and Laura and the girls. Thank you again for joining us today on the Christian Capitalist Podcast, where the more we make, the more we give.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right.
All right, that was awesome. Thanks, man. It's funny. I read an article from a guy pre-COVID, 5, 6 years ago,